right, all right. Well, it looked like the big guy then gave us the thumbs up in the background saying that we are live. And here we are, another fabulous Wednesday of Let's Talk About It. Brother Joe, and we have a fabulous guest in the house, Mr. York, Mark York, who's running for Senate. We're going to kind of get to you in just a second. The people want to know why, right? The people want to know why.
I'm here. Ask the question.
Absolutely. Joe, what's going on with you, man?
Oh, easy day. Weather's not too bad. Can't complain. So we're just on the grind as always.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, before we kind of get into things, we kind of hit them with that famous backpack and the groundkeeping rules. The WNBA done kicked off. You a basketball fan or sports fan, Mr. Mark?
I am. Yep. My family actually went and saw the Lynx a few times back when Lindsey Whalen was playing.
Okay, all right. So are you more WNBA, NBA? Who's your team?
Definitely more NBA, but we're a fan of both. All Minnesota sports.
Okay.
We were at the Timberwolves game, the Sunday game 4, where they tied up the series. My dad, my sister, and me.
Okay, yeah.
So we love the Wolves. We love the Lynx.
There you go. Well, the WNBA they kind of kicked off, May 8th. They still have a long season, ahead of them. The Lynx is 2-2, right now. But we're hoping, and wishing for a solid season from them, and hopefully they can kind of get to those playoffs and be able to kind of make some noise. Where unfortunately our Timberwolves fell a little shy. See, don't start.
These are some fresh wounds.
Yeah.
The Lynx have been able to bring home some championship trophies over the years, so hopefully they can do it again.
Yeah, me and Joe, just an inside thing, when we get to talking about Minnesota sports, he get to digging a little bit, he get that shovel and just,
We're gonna leave him alone today.
But I do think that that the Spurs, they played extremely well, and they're playing extremely well against OKC. They went into Oklahoma and stole game 1, and quite good fashion, I guess, if you will. They went in overtime. Mm-hmm. OKC was only able to muster up 3 points in 5 minutes of overtime. You're not going to win, too many overtime games or too many games, period, only scoring 3 points in 5 minutes.
I think that's dead right, and I like how you bring up the numbers. Greg Popovich built out that Spurs team, and he was a numbers guy, do the boring stuff that the statistics say you should do, and they're still doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's quite amazing when you have a ball club of any kind, of any sport, and they have carved out, such as the Spurs, such as the New York Yankees, even such as the Steelers. Green Bay, even has a solid foundation, and they've been doing the exact same thing every year. I'm a Vikings fan, a diehard Vikings fan, but I'm also, see, there he goes. I can see that look on his face. I'm also willing to admit, when we have various challenges and struggles. And Minnesota has always kind of had some issues, primarily, in that quarterback position. We've had some good quarterbacks. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. But we've gotten some quarterbacks at times that was kind of on their way out the door.
Right.
And they've had some spectacular years when they were here, but we also seem to just struggle to kind of have those pieces, that kind of mesh. I mean, we've had some great season with Moss, and when he was here, and 15-1 at the time, and fell short on that field goal, and yeah, that one stung.
I'm not gonna lie, Anthijuan, I cried when that happened. I was a kid, but yeah,
it stung. It really did, because it really had us as Minnesota Vikings fans like, yeah, this is it. And man, when them ton of bricks kind of fell on us, whew. See. But New York is playing Cleveland. They're up. New York's up 1-0 in that game. I think there's a game actually coming on tonight. I don't know who's playing.
The game.
Yeah. But we cannot move forward without talking about Joe's wonderful Steelers. He will definitely remind you.
You a Steelers fan?
I am a diehard championship fan.
They're one of the Vikings' 4 Super Bowl losses. So We don't forget about that.
Yeah. Neither do we.
And he won't let you forget it either. Yes, man. Well, we're going to go ahead and kind of turn it on over to Joe here real quick because we got some fabulous things that we're going to talk about. Again, we got a dynamic guest in the house tonight, Mr. Mark York, who's running for Senate. And we've had the pleasure of meeting him along the way. And, man, he's, a really nice guy, really fabulous guy. So the people are really looking forward to hearing what you got to say. But before we get there, we got to hit him with them groundkeeping rules in that famous backpack.
Yes, we just ask that everyone respect everyone's comments. Remember, you can text us, call us, or email us, and we'll do our best to answer any questions on this show or the very next show. With that being said, we start, middle, and end every show with the backpack.
That backpack.
And that backpack consists of making sure you have your driver's license and insurance before you get in that vehicle. Remember to place them above the visor. That way, if stopped by law enforcement, it won't be mistaken for a weapon. Remember to stay calm. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. Keep your hands so they can be seen. And as always make it on home to your loved ones. Same thing when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands so they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always make it on home to your loved ones.
Absolutely. And I just kind of want to piggyback on that just a little bit here. Summertime is pretty much upon us. Yes. Kids are, getting ready to kind of get out of school and, things of that nature. We still need to make sure that people are kind of watching out for those school buses, stopping at them, stop arms and things of that nature. Summertime, summer programs. A lot of this stuff is about the safety of children, right? We were kind of talking about that just before we kind of came on air. Right. And so we talking about jobs, we talking about, just summer programs, things that they can kind of get involved with because we don't want our kids to be exposed or be victims or suspects, if you will, into unwanted, activities that we don't have to look too far, right? That they can easily kind of get involved in. Unfortunately, I'll tell you a quick story. A good friend of mine, he has a son-in-law. His daughter just had a baby with this young man, and the baby's just a blessing because the baby was like 4 months premature, only weighed like 1.2, 1.4 ounces, something like that there at birth. The child didn't have a high percentage of living, but she pulled through, and she just had her first birthday. Okay. But this young man, the baby's father, right, got tied up in some things. And unfortunately, he's, 23 years old, and now he's looking at, over 70 years, in prison, for, some crimes that if he would have just had something else better to do, right? And I understand 23 is not 15 or 16 or whatever the case may be, but he's still a young man. And this is where, we as men, if you will, and community members, need to kind of step up and still be involved, in these young men's lives to be able to kind of guide them. And not only the young men, but also the young women as well, because we know, even through Black Butterflies, that there's still a lot of young women out there that has brushes with the law as well, and they too, are trying to, transition back into society and so on and so forth. And what's that old saying? It takes a village to raise a child.
That's right.
Does.
Absolutely. Mr. York, brother, how you been?
Living the dream. I've been all over the state, working 7 days a week, meeting thousands of delegates, making thousands of calls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really excited for our state convention here next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brother Joe, you definitely plan on being there as well.
I do. I'm looking forward to it and very excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to kind of come on down to, our podcast, and being part of what we got going on here. Again, this podcast here is community-based, community-led. We are here to basically try to educate, empower, and enhance the community on a variety of different topics that, that either plague or concerns, the communities or just Minnesota in general, right? So with that being said, give the people, if you will, some background on Mr. Mark York.
Well, happy to, and just wanted to say it's really an honor to be here with you guys. I've loved all of our interactions and your heart to serve, and putting yourself in harm's way as an officer. It's a huge deal, and I think that we conservatives really need to make inroads in these urban communities. So, for me as a farm guy, I know rural Minnesota well, but it's really an honor to be here with you guys and engage. As for me, I'm a farmer from Southwest Minnesota, tiny town called Lake Wilson, population of 250.
250.
250 souls. We're very selective.
Okay. All right.
I went to South Dakota State, worked for a few years at Cargill, so I spent some time in the cities. Both my sisters live here, one in Minneapolis, one in New Hope. I ended up going out east for a PhD in computer science, so happy to talk about AI. It's an exciting and scary topic, both at the same time.
Right.
I spent the last year as a White House fellow, so I was a senior advisor for 5 months under Biden and 7 months under Trump. And they're not the same, by the way. Definitely noticed the difference on Jan 20 of last year. But had the chance to do some real good public service. I wrote our critical mineral strategy, and that became our legislative proposal that we got passed through Congress to bring back mining and minerals production here in the U.S. Obviously, a lot of potential here in Minnesota to mine cobalt, copper, and nickel, and build the industries of the future out of that. So happy to chat more about that. But as for me, I'm a first-time candidate. I just wasn't thrilled with the options we had as conservatives, and so I threw my name in the hat for U.S. Senate. Of course, I was encouraged by a lot of friends out east and a lot of friends in Minnesota, and it's been an awesome journey. Got to know you guys. Happy to chat more about it.
Absolutely.
Sweet.
So how many individuals are actually in that Senate race?
So there were currently 9, I guess, officially registered.
Okay.
There's 6 of us actively campaigning around the state.
Okay. All right. And you've did that due diligence of putting your name on that line, and
That's right. I probably had 100 phone calls, preparing, planning, thinking through, finding a manager. I'm very lucky to be managed, by the way, by Jennifer DeJournet, who was the campaign manager for Ryan Wilson in 2022 when he came within 8,000 votes of winning state auditor. So we have a solid team, just got to do the work.
right. And Brother Joe, you also just recently, did your signing as well?
I did. The official
your
signing.
filing.
I signed yesterday, early in the morning. I think I was probably one of the first out of the box there. I was just excited, man, to get this thing up and going. So we're looking forward to a challenging race and finishing at the finish line.
Right, absolutely. And as of right now, it's just you and the current sheriff,
Correct.
Miss Witt. We have until June 2nd.
Yes.
And just as long as no one else kind of throws their name in that hat, then it'd basically just be you and Miss Witt until November.
Correct.
Absolutely. Well, I'm certain, just as you are, with your campaign, we're just kind of as excited. You talk about numbers and how close you came. We too, came what we felt extremely close based off of what we had to work with, and things of that nature. As we were also kind of talking about, before set, we've basically just kind of been in places and spaces that we just didn't know about. We've had a lot more information. You're talking about being able to be managed by a fabulous person. I'll be the first one to say, I didn't know a whole lot, coming into as, Joe was asking me to kind of, help and be his campaign manager and things. There's a whole lot of things I didn't know. And there's still a whole lot of things I'm figuring it out, kind of as we go. But I do know one thing, I believe in him. I believe in his platform and knowing that when we get in, we're going to be able, like yourself, be able to make Minnesota, Hennepin County, safe again. It's just that simple. With that being said, you have on your webpage, it says, by cutting government waste and needless regulations, we can empower rural communities, make housing and child care affordable, bring critical mineral production to Minnesota, and educate the workers who will power the industries of the future. Minnesota's best days are ahead of us. Can you kind of wrap that up and kind of tell me, because I know there's a few different things in there. So let's just kind of start with when you're talking about making child care and things of that nature, cutting the red tape and making housing and things like that, they're affordable.
Yeah, certainly. So when people think about the American dream, it's not just the poverty rate and GDP, right? We all know GDP doesn't equate to my life. I can go realize my dreams. A number I always like to look at is how many years of work does it take the average worker to be able to buy a house? Mm-hmm. How many years of salary? In the 50s, it was about 3 years. Now it's about 7, right? And so we've got to the point now that the average age of a first-time home buyer has hit 40 years old for the first time in American history, right? We want people to have more kids. They can't afford to have they can't afford to buy a house until they're too old to have kids, right? That's just not going to work. And if you look at it, about 25% of the cost of a new house is just legislative compliance, just all of the things you got to do to be compliant with the law. So the government, by cutting a lot of that red tape, could make houses a lot more affordable, and that would in turn make it easier for families.
So what is kind of the going rate right now, as far as percentages? Is it 9%, on a house, or 7%?
I've heard that that's actually going up a bit because inflation, of course, is starting to tick up again as well. Last I looked, it was maybe 6.5%, 7% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage for a family.
Okay, all right. And so, how would you, kind of, do what you do to kind of bring that down? So then, therefore, folks can perhaps be in that 30-year of age mark to be able to afford a home.
Right. I think the interest rate is part of it. I did an interview I'm hoping to post online here soon with a guy who's been building homes in Owatonna for 40 years. And he said the cost of a home comes down to the 5 L's. Let's see if I can remember them here. Land, labor, lumber, lending, and legislative compliance. So that interest rate, lending, is one of them, of course. The legislation, I think there's a lot we can do to cut red tape and energy efficiency requirements and so forth. Some of the requirements don't even make the home that much more energy efficient. It's certain materials required and such. If you look at labor, there's actually 400,000 skilled trades openings in home building across the U.S. today. Mm-hmm. So we should try to, whether scholarships or grants or funding these community colleges, get more people with those skills as plumbers, electricians, carpenters, framers, etc. On the land side, there's only so much you can do, of course. You can look at zoning and property tax. Also on the lumber side, we used to have a trade relationship with Canada where there would be no tariffs and we could kind of have preferential access to lumber. That went away about 10 years ago under Obama, and that's something I think we should look at again as well. It's a big part of the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of talk about, families and things of that nature, and we know that with cost of inflation kind of going up and gas prices, and we have Memorial Day right around the corner, and people are talking about or scared that gas price is going to peak around $5 or so just for your average basic unleaded. Mm-hmm. I think was it premium as well, in $5.40, $5.50 range, right now. So when we talk about that there, and we're talking about how it is important, that there's a 2-family, income, but you have a child, and individuals need to work. How is that going to break down as far as childcare, making childcare affordable?
Yeah, well, very good question. Childcare is really a states level issue, and you can see the difference state to state. Here in Minnesota, we have the 3rd most expensive childcare in the country.
Third most, huh?
3rd most. If a Minnesota family moved to California or New York, they'd have cheaper childcare. It's about $22,000 per kid per year in this state. Now, and compare that to South Dakota, right over the border, it's $8,900 a year for infant care. So it's way cheaper.
Wow.
Right? Now, why is it so expensive here? Well, there's been a lot of regulations placed on these child care providers, in particular in-home family child care providers.
Right.
And so over the last 10 years or so, we've gone from 12,000 of those to now we're down to about 5,000, and we're losing one a day. And it's stuff like you need to have a fence at least a certain height, and the slats can't be any wider than 3 inches wide. And so it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you want to open a child care in your home. And so a lot of people say the heck with it, so that drives people to centers. Well, centers are more expensive. They got to have a nurse on staff. You have a mortgage, right? You have administrators. And anyway, it just makes it more expensive for families. So the federal government gives childhood development block grants to states. Of course, that's where a lot of the fraud originated too, and that's another topic. But I think the federal government could say, okay, we're giving you these grants to make child care affordable. If you're going to be eligible, you can't put a ton of regulations on child cares that make them unaffordable.
Right.
I think that's a reasonable thing we could do from the federal government.
Absolutely. Well, when we talk about grants and federal government and things of that nature, Joe, I know that we have had conversations and things have kind of come up, pertaining to the cost, if you will, as far as Hennepin County and how, they've kind of went over budget and things of that nature. And there's a lot of different various grants to help kind of bring those necessary deputies, on board, and also just to help with cost overall.
Yeah, there's some collaborative efforts with our federal partners that we could do to offset some of those expenses, so it's not directly coming out of all county funds. So, and it's something that the last administration should have took a look at it ahead of time. But as you know, they were scrambling to try and get enough staff based on the fact that they didn't want to lose their license. And in the process of that, they didn't take into account that they would have to pay these folks. And so we ended up almost $11 million in the hole to start off the new year.
Ouch.
It's a lot of things, right? I mean, it's all based off of money. And we've seen Minnesota lose a ton of money, over this last few years, and it's a pretty hard pill to swallow, right? So when we talk about, keeping the Minnesota dollars, making sure that we're preventing the fraud, you're talking about, how AI, would be able to help with that. Explain how that would help.
I appreciate the question. I think the first thing I'd like to say is, I'll just quote Charlie Munger, who is Warren Buffett's old investing partner. He always said, those who create systems that encourage cheating are destroying their societies. And I think that's very much what's happened here. It's so easy for people to submit blank receipts and the money keeps coming. Why wouldn't they do it, right? It's unethical of them. But I think we have to look at, why do we have systems that make it easy to cheat? And how can we make them hard to cheat? What do credit cards do? Credit cards, there's some fraud, but by and large, they're not going out of business. What do? Every time you swipe your card, they have a fraud detection algorithm that says, hey, is it normal that Anthijuan would be buying 200 coffees at the Arizona border at midnight? Probably not, right?
Right.
So if someone tries to do that, it'll say payment declined, and you'll get a call 2 minutes later asking if you're trying to buy 200 coffee. You're right, and you'll say, well, no. And meanwhile, our federal government or state government just issues money without any kind of check like that.
Right.
So now that we have AI and even traditional analytics, we can run each payment before it goes out the door through a fraud detection algorithm and to detect some of these patterns. So, for instance, there was a building in St. Paul that had 400 Medicare businesses in it. When the 399th Medicare business applied for a refund for services rendered, in quotations, the algorithm would say, hey, wait a minute, it's unusual to have 399 such businesses in one building. We're going to flag that before we send the money. And I actually have a bill drafted. I'm planning to release to the media here soon. It would stand up a fraud detection center in the Department of the Treasury out in D.C. And I think that could actually be kind of a good relationship. You'd have the DHS here in Minnesota that wants to give money for good causes, and then you'd have the fraud detection unit in D.C., and they kind of work together to make sure money is given out responsibly to people who need it.
Absolutely. And how do you think, Joe, that being in that seat of Hennepin County Sheriff, how would you be able to kind of play a role, in assisting, others?
Well, we're going to develop the white-collar crime unit and try to make that a little more robust. I think a couple years back we heard the state say they didn't feel like they had enough investigators in place to really go after white-collar crime, and that's what allowed things to kind of get rampant. But, remember, fraud occurs at that amount at the highest levels, meaning someone knew it was going through and turned their head the other way. And so we have to hold folks accountable and have to stay on top of those things.
Absolutely.
Do you think AI could help scan through some of the records faster?
Yeah.
And maybe track down some of these white collar? Because you guys have to put together a case.
Yeah, because AI is going to be able to detect patterns. It's gonna be able to detect individuals. It'll be able to contact the necessary folks to flag certain cases, and we're going to detect it faster.
Right.
It's not going to be after they've spent millions of dollars. It's going to be while they're in the process of trying to get that money.
Absolutely.
I think that's an important point because as it happens today, we see something looked fishy. we try to gather, there's an investigation, we try to gather evidence, and then we go to court, and that takes a while. And by the time you actually convict, that money's probably been out the door for 3 years, right?
Absolutely.
So we need something proactive.
Yes.
Yeah, and the problem is that, sadly enough, the folks who actually need the resources don't get it because you've got to pause it to look into it, and then they're not getting the services that are needed. And then those folks that don't need it, they're just kind of like, they disappear or run off, you know what I mean?
Right.
And most of them end up paying part of it back, and we never recoup all the money back. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's well said. And I actually think our friends on the left should be screaming about this more than anybody. If you think these social programs are important, then you think you'd want them to be robust.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know you were talking about bring new companies, building jobs and things of that nature. What is that tied into? How do you plan on doing such?
Well, I think we actually have this proud history in Minnesota of Greater Minnesota providing raw materials to the cities, who then make them into value-added products, right? So I think St. Anthony Falls was dammed in 1848 for hydropower. Incidentally, might be the same year that Joe Biden was born, actually. Just kidding. But no, we've had lumber, iron ore from northern Minnesota, wheat from outstate. It's all been brought here. It developed our milling industries, the lumber exchange, right? And 75% of the iron ore for World War II, by the way, was mined in northern Minnesota. And we have kind of that potential again to take cobalt, copper, and nickel. That's exactly what you need to make batteries, iPhones, electric cars, drones, all the industries of the future. We can build that here. And I really think that's how we kind of can build on our proud history of business and technology and innovation and create jobs and keep people here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's always individuals, right, that are maybe not as clear, may not necessarily understand what Senate does and how they work, or if they should vote, and things of that nature, right? Can you kind of break it down and kind of simplify it for the folks as far as what Senate does and why they do, and kind of why is it important for folks to vote?
Absolutely. Well, first off, you got to stand up and be counted, because donors and politicians and people in Congress and city council, they absolutely look at who votes and shows up. That's your constituency. So if the only people voting are people 50 and older, well, then they're going to be prioritized, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is just kind of what is the hard actual power of the Senate, and then what is sort of the, let's call it soft power of things they can influence. So on its face, Senate votes to pass bills. They vote to confirm presidential appointments. So judges, they would vote, on treaties, all that kind of stuff, for foreign diplomacy, all that. I think a less appreciated power of the Senate is that they can go into the executive branch and direct attention to certain things that are happening or not happening. I was working at the Pentagon, and one of the senators, I won't name his name, but a well-known senator came and visited our office, and after that, the Department of Defense paid a lot more attention to us, a lot more money came our way, we had a lot more of a mandate to go and do what we're doing, providing loans to companies, it turned out. And I think as a senator from Minnesota, and especially as a conservative senator, I could go to the Department of Energy or the Department of the Interior, the Bureau of Land Management, the Forestry Service, and look at what do we need to do to create jobs in Minnesota? What do we need to do to handle environmental problems? I could go to Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Agriculture, similarly, and stand up for farmers on E15 or things like wetland management. It's a big deal having a senator stand up for your state and direct that attention to things that need to be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone was to ask why should I vote for Mark York, what would you tell them?
I'd say if you want Minnesota to be the land of opportunity again, you should vote for me. I am absolutely committed to making it easier to create jobs and to getting the government out of the way in ways that are making life expensive. If you want the cost of tuition at universities to go down, house prices, daycare, you should vote for me. And I've already been in government. I'm the only candidate who's written legislation that's passed through Congress. We're going to get these things done.
Absolutely. And if one wanted to contact you, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Mark York MN. You can also go to our website. It's york4mn.com. And we have our phone number and email right there. Reach out.
Go ahead, give it out. What's your phone number?
Oh, my personal cell?
Well, no, whatever the office or how someone would kind of contact you, contact your campaign, or
Let me pull up my website here. I'll
all right.
You told me to turn my phone off, so.
I just meant turn it down. But that's all right. We ain't got nothing but time. And with that being said, brother, when we kind of talk about, just safety, as a whole, we're talking about children, summer school and things of that nature. We're talking about, funds and stuff like that there, and how everything is always kind of, surrounded by money, and people talking about that, grants is only go so far, and then we're running out of money, and then we just kind of continue to see, this continual loop, if you will, primarily, in Hennepin County, right? Mm-hmm. What is it that, you're going to bring, to, Hennepin County, to the folks, in regards to safety, to kind of give these children, if you will, an opportunity?
Right away, we're going to work with the community to identify and solve problems. This is a community issue. This is not just a law enforcement issue. People want to feel safe. They want to be able to take their families out. They want to be able to enjoy themselves. They want their family and friends to be safe. And we want the message to get out to the people entering into our community. This is a safe place to come. So we're going to be working for transparency, accountability. We're going to get a more robust sheriff department that can, prevent the crime before we have to actually fix it. And so we're going to do things like that. We're going to be touching bases with community-based groups through collaboration and things of that nature, and just out and visible in the community, something that we haven't had in a while. Just old-fashioned taking the bad guy to jail, and just teaching our cops. Is this an arrestable moment or a teachable moment? Using that discretion or authority, So that's what it's about, being approachable, and so that's what we're going to be doing here.
Absolutely.
Can I actually jump in here?
Absolutely.
One thing I've seen in a lot of places around the world, honestly, is outside experts trying to come into the community and tell them what they need. And you've spent time in these communities. What are they saying they need to make their community safe?
Yeah, they say we need to be able to see the police. Right now, the biggest complaint is the response time, right? And they've been given a lot of other options that didn't get the person there. And it's clear that people truly feel better when someone shows up versus being referred to online and completing a report. So it's important that they know that somebody's out there watching their back.
Yeah, you have to, maybe not on air because it kind of takes a little bit long, but you have to hear his story about being a victim of exactly what he's talking about. The short version is that he has an office, and his office was damaged by a bullet. And so therefore he contacted 911. 911 basically stated that because, the person is kind of no longer on scene and it happened within the past couple of days, you have to call 311. 311 then told him to do something else. And it was just kind of a Ferris wheel.
Yes.
And trying to get, just your simple service, to be done. So then therefore he can contact his insurance company or whatever it is that he needs to do next. Right. But, this stuff went on for days.
3 days.
3-day
process.
To
get a police officer to show up.
Right. So is there just a shortage of staff or what's the deal there?
Well, I think there's been a shift in priorities and how they see the calls. And for some reason, they truly believe that people are happy with being able to go online or dial 311. But the problem of it is they're not advertising enough that if you don't have the app downloaded to your phone, 311 doesn't work for a cell phone. And then you need to go online. And so once I went online, there was the question of, do you think there was a weapon involved? And when I pushed yes, because it was a bullet, of course, it triggered, you need to talk to an officer. So I was like right back where I started originally. And so that went on for a couple of days.
Yeah, it was quite comical, when it first happened. Luckily, he wasn't in the office and nobody else was in the office and no one got hurt, but just the there's this 72-hour process of trying to
Yeah.
just kind of get certain things done, was just quite
And
amazing.
uniquely enough, I think what people don't realize is Minneapolis is just launching a new program where they're having cops go out and interact with the businesses and the people in the community. And, for me, it's kind of like that's something we should be doing anyway. You should have been already talking to the business owners. You should have been interacting with the people. So it shouldn't be us gearing up that, oh, my God, look what we're doing. That's the job.
Right.
And that's something that we're going to be pushing, that we're out there visible and doing the job.
Absolutely. You have that info? That phone number?
I do, yeah. So our campaign phone number here is 612-807-1055.
Say it again.
612-807-1055.
All right. And you said you were on what platforms again?
At Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok.
All right. All right.
For the
you
Gen
go.
Zs.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask both of you guys this question because it's such a hot topic, right? And you stated earlier, people love blood, right? ICE. Everybody was kind of, up in arms about ICE and what ICE did and how Trump sent, 3,000 plus and all this other type of stuff. What is your outlook? What is your take on ICE?
So often in life that there's what you do and there's how you do it. And I think the how you do it can matter more than the what you do. Right? Ostensibly, what was ICE here to do? Enforce immigration laws. Okay. But how they did it was, and I chatted with some of the officers, there wasn't good coordination with local law enforcement. And whose fault that is can be discussed, but there wasn't coordination. They doubled down and they doubled down again. And of course, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but it looked to me like there was a lot of chaos. And, unfortunately, 2 people died. And if I'm being completely honest, I think we're lucky it was only 2 people. Right? That was a volatile situation with whistles blowing. I think it all starts with, what are the laws we're trying to enforce here? We're trying to enforce immigration laws that have not been substantially overhauled since 1986. These are 40-year-old laws that don't really make sense anymore. There's also a lot of loopholes in the system. So yeah, there's over 10 million illegal immigrants in the country, right? We weren't enforcing our southern border. That's got to change. There's also an asylum system that is, let's say, easily cheated. It's essentially a loophole to get into the country when you're not necessarily being politically persecuted. I think Congress has to act and make our laws make sense. And I think that ICE has to enforce those laws, but in a way that is collaborating with local law enforcement. I would hope there's no one that disagrees that if someone is a dangerous criminal and they're here illegally, that they should be deported.
Right.
I just think, I think the reality is Trump was saying, hey, Minnesota is this left-governed place with all this fraud. I'm going to send in my officers and take that. And I think the local state government, if you look at statements from Fry, you look at statements from Walz, similarly combative. This is Trump's, they called it an invasion, and they fought back in that same way. So when you have this volatile situation, I think you need to step back, have some conversations, and move forward once you've resolved that. That didn't happen.
Absolutely. Brother Joe,
Yes,
Mark
sir.
made a good point, and we've talked about this before when we talk about collaboration. We talked about how we had our federal partners, making phone calls, to a number where individuals were not answering. And then by the time they got a hold to, a live body, you can hear the urgency in this supervisor, command staff person's voice that his people need help.
Yes.
And they needed help 5 minutes ago when he made the first phone call.
Yes.
How are you planning on, working with your federal partners?
First off, that can't happen again. We have to work with our federal partners. We cannot have cops in harm's way and have no one on the other end of the phone to make sure that they're good to go. We just simply have to find ways to communicate and collaborate. We have to be at that table. We all share the same common goal, which is to keep everyone safe. And we need to work together to make sure that happens. The ICE agents were not asking for us to do immigration enforcement. They just needed us to do our part as local law enforcement because that's what we're trained to do. And if we supported them while they're doing their job, while properly informing the community as to what was going to happen, ways to communicate with family members throughout the process, making sure that those agents and officers were safe along with the citizens, it would have had a different outcome. So we definitely have to make sure we're at those tables, talking to Homeland Security about how we can better support them and what is it that they need from us to be able to do what they do. We're definitely going to be working with folks inside the jails. And of course, in Hennepin, we'll have to ensure that we run that by the commissioners to ensure that they're on board with that. But we're going to be able to explain to them why it's going to be better for us to do targeted enforcement, versus just kind of doing street sweeps where we don't know exactly where we're going. And it's going to keep everybody safe. It's going to be a very decent, robust plan, but it's going to keep people safe, and we won't need thousands of agents in the streets to make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that it's one of the things is we have to educate the people, because a lot of folks don't necessarily understand or realize, what ICE is, who ICE is, what they're meant to do, things of that nature. You stated, York, that there was leaders that was using inflammatory words that kind of got certain people, hyped up even more so. You kind of stated, both, individuals stated that no one really kind of took a step back, you know what I'm saying, to really look at exactly the totality of the circumstances. And sometimes even if, an entity may not necessarily be delivering, that message appropriately, you still need to stay professional, because you still are responsible for individuals that's within your county, individuals that's within the state of Minnesota, and making sure that they have the tools, the resources, et cetera, in that famous backpack in order for them to be safe, right? Again, you said it, Joel, you said it, that we're pro-police, but we're anti-crime,
Right.
And if someone, foreign or domestic, if you will, is committing crime and creating unnecessary, unreasonable safety issues and concerns, they need to be dealt with appropriately, whether that's local law enforcement, federal partners or other.
Right. I've actually heard this. I've heard the phrase misplaced empathy. Right. We want to have empathy for people who, maybe you're a good guy or gal, but you had a bad day, you hung out with the wrong people, and something bad happened. But at the same time, you got to have empathy for the people who could be victims of someone who's not handled, right? And I think we have to have respect for law enforcement. There's police officers die every day, and we need accountable police, of course. But it's interesting. Again, if you go into these communities, and I've talked to some of these folks and read polling, like, they generally want more policing and they want better policing. They aren't trying to get rid of police.
Absolutely, and that's where you talk about all the time. Is this an arrestable moment or is this a teachable moment?
Right.
The
cops do have that discretionary authority, and it's important to understand the logistics of what each agency brought to the table. The Border Patrol has a completely different set of rules of engagements based on the things that they encounter at the border. The reason why they're asking for local law enforcement is because that's your specialty. That's what you do, inner city urban policing. And so we're coming to the experts asking for your assistance. I don't know the land. I'm not from here. I don't know where people are. You know best what's happening in your community. You know locations, how to get to hospitals, all that good stuff in place. And that's what they were asking. Hey, we need you to do your part. And then we're going to do our part. And that just did not happen. It was chaos. And so when you have leaders saying that you should kind of rise up against these guys, it only set the stage for people to think they didn't have to follow direction of law enforcement. And as a result of that, that's what happened. And then when you mix that in with if these agents do something that you think is harmful to you, we as local police can't do anything to stop them. It just sounds to the people like, wait, I'm going to get hurt and no one's going to help me. right? And so we can't have that mixed message out there. There needs to be clear direction as to how we're going to move as an agency, and that just didn't happen. And it left the police chiefs kind of searching for where they stood because, let's face it, they're appointed positions. They pretty much have to follow the lead of their leadership or be replaced. And the sheriff is elected official. The sheriff should have gave clear direction, and she had somebody to fall back on, which was her county prosecutor, who was her attorney, to give her the legal guidance that she needed, and that just didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that we're kind of coming down to the end of another, fabulous show.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. Mr. York, again, thank you for kind of coming on. You're always welcome.
I'd love to come back.
During your campaign, after the campaign, you're more than welcome to come back because we're still going to be here, even after we win. Side note, you got on a beautiful ring.
Yes.
You two are brothers in arms as Masons.
Yes.
And you didn't find that out until today.
Yeah, about an hour ago.
Absolutely. I'm not a Mason.
We can fix that.
Joe and I, we've discussed that. Absolutely. But for those that don't really necessarily understand, even myself, that don't necessarily know about the brotherhood, if you will. You know what I'm saying? What is that about?
I'm actually going to go back. I started a nonprofit that provides farmer services to farmers in West Africa. And there's a phrase in Burkina Faso they have. It's in French, but in English it would be, if you want to go far, or if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think...
Say that one more time.
If you want to go fast, go alone.
Okay.
If you want to go far, go together. And so you as an individual, Anthijuan, you can try to be the most learned, ethical guy, a good member of your community, helping people out. But it's just, you're going to go a lot farther if you have another group of guys around you who's trying to do the same thing, who's trying to be, a good servant of God, and who's trying to use your talents and your treasure and your time to help those around you. If you're with a group of people trying to do that same thing, you're going to make each other better. And for me, that's what I love about the Masons. There's some legacy. My grandfather was actually the Grand Master of Minnesota Masons back in the day. And yeah, brotherhood, fraternity, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Joe, I'm sure you have some things to say too, but
I think you said it all. We're just, good men making good men even greater than they are, and surrounding them with a brotherhood that secures that foundation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We hold each other accountable too.
Yes.
Yes. You guys speak so well, man. I swear I feel like I need to sign up right now.
Hurry up.
In all honesty and transparency, I admire the way that you speak about your father and your grandfather. There seems to be a lot of history, within your family. I'm sure within any family. But I've heard you multiple times, give your father and your grandfather the praise, if you will, that they, I'm sure, deserve and desire. I too, have an Anthijuan junior. I have a junior, and then he also has. I have a third now.
Wow.
And I can only, as I'm listening to you, I can only hope, that my son and my grandson, will be speaking about me the way that you speak about your father and your grandfather. I think that's pretty remarkable.
Well, I could tell you take leadership and fatherhood very seriously, and I'm sure they will for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I try.
Public service runs deep in my family. My dad's been township clerk for 27 years. My grandfather, he was Grand Master of Minnesota Masons. He was also the national president of the Rural Electric Association. My great-grandfather was a Republican representative in the Minnesota State Legislature, as was his dad. So,
absolutely.
Apparently, we don't like to just make money. We like to serve as well.
Well, you understand that part of doing what you do means giving back. And it's a legacy that everybody wants to live. And I always say, live the way you want to have others live as well. Kids are our little computers, man, and they're watching us. And whatever we put in is what we get out. And, you want them to go, man, that's my hero. I want to be just like him for positive reasons.
Right.
And that's a unique compliment because, as you know, parenting doesn't come with a handbook. I mean, you're out there trying to wing it as you go, and there's a different situation every day, all day, right?
Absolutely.
But it's important that, because I know when my kids are talking to me and they're like, Dad, you did so much and you've been there, and it's like, yeah, well, that's what I do every day. That's what I'm supposed to do. But that's important, and it does make you feel good to go, man, those kids are looking at me for some positive reason, and obviously, whatever I've done has made a positive impact on them.
Right. Well, really quick, 'cause I know that the big guy then came in and, he's about to turn the lights off on us in just a second, but you're talking about giving back. And I don't want to leave out here, when we talk about, you being, previously on the board for Black Butterflies, which was young ladies between, I think it was 18 and 24, something like that there that had brushes with the law, and they're trying to get acclimated kind of back in to society, if you will. You've just recently kind of started Beeks Youth Centers, trying to give kids and provide kids with services and resources to kind of keep them active,
Yes.
Throughout the summer and even beyond, for that matter. You've been a business owner with Flex Bail Bonds, and even though there's some folks might, not necessarily know all about bail bonds, or some folks might be a little upset because, they get these small bonds and or things of that nature. I mean, that's, that is what it is. But my point is, I was about to forget the most important one.
What's that?
Twin Cities Recovery Program. I mean, that is a huge program where at one point I had the honor of being able to sit on the board, being able to help those with addiction. We have been at a lot of different, community events, being guest speakers about a lot of different things. So before we get off, I just want to personally, say thank you to the both of you, for what you have done, in your respective areas and things of that nature, and taking the steps, becoming a pioneer, if you will, of your respective lanes that you're running for. Again, Mr. York, you're more than welcome, to come back anytime you get ready. Joe, I'll see you next week. But hey, we are down to another fabulous show. But before we get out of here, Brother York, I'm going to give you one last chance to give the people the opportunity to get in contact with you. How do they do so?
Yeah, go to our website, york4mn.com. Right there, you can find our email is info@york4mn.com, and our phone number is 612-807-1055.
All right. Brother Joe,
Yes.
We are down to a fabulous show. The big man that came in, he's giving us that eye, But again, we want to thank CCX Create for allowing us to be here each and every Wednesday, for us to bring you information, resources, services, individuals like fabulous Mr. Mark York over here to share with you the things that are important. Remember, vote. Joe has always said, a no vote is a vote, and if you need further information about, voting or where to go to vote or how to register or whatever it is that you think you may need, please, contact one of us or contact, someone, in your area. I'm certain they will have the necessary information for you, but it is imperative that you get out and vote whomever it is that you think, feel, or believe that's going to provide you with what it is that you deserve and desire in your community. Again, CCX Create allows us to be here each and every Wednesday. This stuff is not easy. It's not cheap. It's not for free. And they will definitely love for you to reach in those pockets and pull out those loose change and push that donate button. And I'm sure Mr. York and also Mr. Beeks will also love you to go on to their website and push that donate button as well. Nothing, too small, right? I mean, we get it. Not everyone has, $10,000 or $1,000. And if you got $10, we will definitely, appreciate it. I heard a story really quick that there's a gentleman there was a person, I don't know if a male or female, that is supporting a campaign, and he has $5, on a rotating thing that just automatically goes into the person that he's supporting, every 2 weeks. Every time he gets paid, he just, supports $5. That's huge.
It all helps. It all helps.
For a person to be able to make that commitment, behind a person. And again, it's not $500 or $5,000, but, for that person,
important.
that $5, I'm sure it means a lot.
And it absolutely all adds up.
Absolutely.
I have hundreds of people who've donated as little as $1.
Yes.
And it all helps. It helps us get the word out and build a coalition.
Brother Joe, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you, bro, so we can kind of get on up out of here and enjoy some of this rest of this fabulous day. Again, we have Memorial Day coming up. People, have fun. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. I know gas prices is going to kind of hit some people in the pocket, but, you cannot put a price, on being with family and making those memories and having good times, and then therefore we can all, be like Mr. York over here and have those wonderful stories about our fathers and grandfathers and mothers and grandmothers and all that other good stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and turn on over to you, Brother Joe, so we can kind of go on and get on up out of here.
All right. With that being said, we thank everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week. It's another great show talking about things. And if you got something in the community you want to bring down, make sure you reach out and contact us. With that being said, we start, middle, and end that show with a backpack.
That famous backpack.
And that backpack consists of making sure you got your driver's license and insurance before you get in that vehicle. Remember to place them above the visor. That way, if stopped by law enforcement, it's easily accessible. Won't be mistaken for a weapon. Remember to stay calm. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. Keep your hands where it can be seen. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Same thing when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Been another great show. My name's Joe Banks.
That's Mr. York to your right. And I'm Anthijuan Beeks.
And we just talked about it.
Peace.
Peace.